Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to talk about our fantasy football rankings 2.0. We're going to do it in a way that we kind of show the differences between the first rankings we had and the second rankings we've had, but we're also going to show you all how the other websites have changed. So we're going to show you ESPN. Yahoo has not updated in 4 weeks, which is great
they're
because
falling
that's
behind
not
the
helpful.
eight ball.
Sleeper is really great, and they've been updating. So we'll give you all of those. We'll kind of talk to you about through those. And yeah.
And the biggest thing is from our 1.0 to 2.0, there hasn't been a ton of changes or updates or anything. We're right before the first week of preseason, so there's no big indicators on TV
Right.
of what's happening. Like there's a few injuries. We'll talk about DeAndre Hopkins and Justin Herbert. Those are the only two that really are affected prior to us releasing this video. These happened a day ago where DeAndre Hopkins is out 46 weeks. So we dropped him a little bit. Justin Herbert, we dropped it a little bit
Right.
because of uncertainty about lingering injuries. Other than that, everybody's fairly healthy. I don't remember Jordan Addison if that DUI happened before our 1.0 or not.
Oh,
But
no, that was after.
that was after.
It was
Okay,
after.
so that's a little bit of a change. And then Rasheed Rice, another one where there's still no news on a suspension that could linger into waiting until next season.
Right.
Kind of like Alvin Kamara when he beat up a person and then
Nothing.
wasn't suspended for 18 months basically.
Yeah.
So we had to move him up by default, but he's still lower than where we view him compared to everybody else. Anyhow, let's get into it. Start with the quarterback position. Not a ton of changes up top. Same tier with the first three: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. You should be very, very happy about any of these guys. It's as good as it gets. They're reasonable prices. That just can't complain about them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like Josh Allen is the only one with real upside to go over 400 fantasy points. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to put him in the number one spot, especially if he does have the rushing upside that he's had in the past. Patrick Mahomes, he had a terrible receiving core last year, dropping balls left and right. This year, they've gotten a lot better, and we reflect that a lot more than other sites do. So that's something that we kind of try to talk about. And then Jalen Hurts, rushing upside is there. So I see no problem with any of these guys. I think they're pretty easy.
Yeah, and then the next tier, kind of all in similar boats. Again, there hasn't really been any changes across any platforms on quarterbacks. Maybe swapping spots with some guys, but Lamar, CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, and Dak Prescott, they're just all very safe options. Some of them, it's really based on where they're going in terms of ADP. This is a rank, so we're identical. Kind of the biggest kind of standout with that is CJ Stroud. We have him QB5. He's basically 5 or 6 on every platform, but we had him on our ADP hates. Why is that? Well, we're getting him in the 6th round or even 7th round in best ball, and he's a 4th round pick on every platform in redraft. Big difference on how you're going to build out your roster and team, and that's why it's kind of like, oh, I love the player, hate the ADP. Somebody like Isaiah Pacheco. That's just kind of where we see it. But ranking wise, nothing's really changed in that regard.
Yep. And then the next grouping, Kyler. Here, let me scroll down. Apologies. Kyler, Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence. Just the first two guys have some rushing upside, but question marks all across this whole board. Kyler coming off injury, Anthony Richardson coming off injury and not knowing how to protect himself, and being a sophomore. Jordan Love is a guy that we are not sure because he's a tale of two parts of the season last year. Caleb Williams is a rookie, and then Trevor Lawrence has been down. So these are guys that are just have question marks, but have upside to be very good at football. So
yeah, I mean, you can't really go wrong with many of these guys. This is like the last tier of guys where, and Trevor Lawrence may or may not deserve to be a part of this, but we believe in the upside and what he is. But most of these guys is like the last cutoff point to, okay, every week I know my starter, and then after this it's all okay, who's got the best matchup,
right?
Because if you have to split up and you got Caleb Williams and Trevor Lawrence or Brock Purdy, Jaden Daniels, Goff, Tua. We'll even bring them in on the next tier. I'm not going to start Tua in the cold. I don't care. I'm just done trying to even believe in it, which, it burns you more than it does. So if Jared Goff is 14 games in a dome, and he's playing the Commanders,
Okay.
he's a starter. But no, he's on the road against Philly. Ooh, I might go with Jaden Daniels, who's playing the Raiders, and he
Right.
can rush for stuff. That's kind of where we kind of go. And I know I brought in tier 4, but really there's been no changes with any of these guys. The only change major for us was Justin Herbert going down a couple spots and then dropping a tier. The main reason behind that, this shouldn't affect his availability week 1 and stuff, but sometimes that's even worse than just sitting out. I can attest to, I would much rather, in hindsight, have Joe Burrow started out on IR, been completely healthy, and then come into the season, and after 3 weeks of me streaming a quarterback, I have my guy.
Right.
But because he tried to play, he sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had to start him. So that was even worse because you probably weren't happy with his production.
Right.
And then once he started to get healthy, he got re-aggravated, and then he had another injury. And it was just it kind of avalanche from there. With Justin Herbert, much lower volume because he doesn't have Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, and Mike Williams to rely on now. He's got young guys, unproven wide receiver 3s and 2s that are trying to replace those target shares. And it's a more run game friendly thing.
Right.
So even before that, before the injury news, we knew his upside wasn't going to be there. We just thought he was so talented that his floor deserved to be a part of the next tier. Well, now he's got a foot injury. And based on what I've seen, it's just kind of one of those things that there's no real way of healing without time.
Yeah,
and if you're just gonna say, 2 weeks and it's gonna week 1, he'll be fine, and that just tells me, okay, it's gonna bother him for most of the first half of the season.
It's almost like a hamstring or
exactly.
something.
And
it feels like
really easy to re-aggravate because it's kind of right where the bridge, where the ankle and the foot start or meet. So you can get rolled up on and re-aggravate it easily.
Yes.
It's so much easier or just as easy to re-aggravate, kind of similar to Joe Burrow. So that's why we had to move him down a tier. We like him as a quarterback. We just think that maybe this is just a year to avoid him at this point.
Right.
Whereas like the ADP was already there. We weren't just getting a crazy amount of in best ball. And even if we were, it was a QB2. Like, what are you going to do? We probably had a strong QB1 anyway.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But it does take a negative effect, and we'll have to reevaluate the pass catching offense. Ladd McConkey is obviously still too high for us, but Josh Palmer we've gotten a ton of, and now he's risen. Do we still want to keep on investing? I don't think so at this point.
Yeah.
Just kind of having to make those decisions, but that's the biggest negative change in this grouping.
Right. And then looking at these other guys in this group, this tier 5 group, the quarterback 2s with occasional boom, you have Aaron Rodgers, who barely cracks that group, if you ask me. Baker, who had one of the best years of his career last year. Kirk Cousins, a guy that, in a new team, new situation, has good pass catchers. Matt Stafford, good pass catchers. No rushing upside by any of these guys, I feel like, except for maybe Baker. And then Deshaun Watson, who we are hoping, because we have a lot of him in best ball, is better than QB18.
And again, this tier is just kind of, they're just going to get you 15 to 16, but there's high risk because Aaron Rodgers 40 off an Achilles. Kirk Cousins is 36 off an Achilles. Baker had a career year, or not a career year, but a career resurgence rather last year.
Right.
Still has no rushing upside. Matthew Stafford has dealt with some injuries of late and also has no rushing upside. Deshaun Watson is talented enough to be in the other tiers, but since he has left Houston, we have not seen anything close to what he used to be.
Right, for sure.
So by default, he's above those guys, and his ADP is at a discount to where it's like, I'd rather have him in the 15th, 16th round than invested 13th on a Kirk Cousins.
Right, yeah.
But at the same time, I understand why he's in this tiers, and it's because we just haven't seen it yet. But this is his true first offseason without issues or health. And maybe he's just back to where he can be a borderline quarterback 1 and 2. But it's just way too risky. And then Justin Herbert, like I said, has entered the fold just because of his His floor is just much lower. Injury risk is higher. All that just doesn't bode well. If you're going to invest in deeper leagues or super flex leagues, fine as QB2s. But if you have to rely on more than that, then you're probably a little at risk for your team.
Right. And then this last grouping, we have one of the most polarizing players on this whole list. Justin Fields is considered right now to possibly be winning the starting job in Pittsburgh. If he wins the Pittsburgh starting job, he will probably jump, I don't know, to the tier 4.
Mhm.
And that makes him very interesting if you got a lot of him in best ball, which we have a good amount of him in best ball. So that's very exciting. But just a polarizing guy. And then Will Levis should take a step forward on a bad team, though. And it makes it hard when DeAndre Hopkins goes down. He was probably your most consistent wide receiver. Bryce Young has a lot of new pieces, had one of the worst seasons ever for a rookie quarterback. So there's a lot of question marks in this range, but you could see some upside.
Yeah, these are all, well, it's 2 streaming options and one that just, again,
Polarizing.
we are early on it. And I can't wait to say, should he be the starter week 1? I can't wait to say I told you so to those that just didn't believe.
Right.
Because again, the reason we have him higher ranked, even projecting him as a backup, is because he's going in undrafted on redraft leagues and in the 18th round, 19th round on best ball.
Right. Yeah.
When you are in those rounds, you're looking for somebody with just give me 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And if he is starting at any point, he has a floor of being a top 10 quarterback that week. No one else can say that in any position, in any range, for anything. He's the one outlier, and it's just because he's capped because I don't know if he's going to start.
Yeah.
Well, if you already have 2 serviceable quarterbacks and he never starts,
fine.
Whatever, man. Like John Mechie, it's okay. We still won money.
Right.
That's fine.
19th round pick.
Exactly. But the occasional ones that you get right, like Jake Ferguson, when a lot of people were on Noah Fant,
right?
We were on Jake Ferguson. He was top 10 tight end, and we had a ton of him.
Jake Ferguson and Tank Dell was who I had in the 17th through 19th round last year.
Exactly. So with him, if you remove Russell Wilson, said that Justin Fields came into the year as a starter, and all offseason he was starting with the ones and stuff like that, which he has been playing with the ones because Russell's been hurt, and he's been having some strong practices. That's why this report's come out. Again, he would be in the first 9 rounds of every single league, every format, doesn't matter, because of his legs.
Yep.
And so now, if he's the starter, again, he would be in tier 3 for us. Probably above Trevor, maybe even above Caleb.
Yeah.
Flirting with Jordan Love. Like, that's how much higher he would be if he was the starter. So you just need a couple weeks. Like, that's why we have him so much higher, and that's why he deserves to be where he's at.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he could get you 150 rushing yards, like in any given game. So why not get him? You know, especially if you're picking him in the 19th round, like you're not spending anything. That's the same round that you're getting like Mike Gesicki, Jalen McMillan's, Jalen Hyatt's, Audric Estime's. Like, yeah, all those guys, you can paint a picture. I can paint a really cool picture if Justin Fields is the starter on the football team, because that means that you just have insane upside.
It's like somebody gave you a $20 lottery ticket and was like, hey, give me a nickel and you can have this and good luck.
Yep.
And then if you lose, you lost a nickel. And if you won, big return.
Right.
That's how we view it right now.
And then we're going to jump over. We have some rankings that we have set up for everybody. We're looking at just the quarterbacks right now, of course. And basically how this works is we're taking the difference of our original ranking on these guys and we're subtracting our new ranking and we're showing the differential. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a way for us to track what we see throughout the offseason. Guys getting hurt. Justin Herbert is the number 1 guy, got hurt.
So with this, obviously, you know, maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll do this with just position ranks. But because there's been no movement really with any platform, we just wanted to show you who's trending up and down. So that's why we went with the overall ADP rank. Obviously, Josh Allen has risen the most. And it's just because, hey, listen, if I have a 2-3 turn pick, he's worth that to me. And so that's why, and again, look at everything else. There's really half the thing, and there's next to no movement with everybody. But you got some where Justin Herbert getting hurt, we had to move him down, and we actually have to his ADP we haven't adjusted, so we actually have to move him even more down.
Right.
Caleb Williams, we were probably a little overzealous with where we ranked him ADP wise, but that doesn't change where his ranking is. We just were like, oh, okay, well, maybe he shouldn't have been in the top 95.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's why we
he's
bumped
still
him a
in the
little bit.
same quarterback spot,
Yeah.
actually. So,
And then with Kirk Cousins, I don't think it's changed much, but again, it's just like he was probably too high. Deshaun Watson, same thing. And then everybody else is pretty much the same.
Right.
And you'll see much more differential for the skill positions that we do. But, that's kind of where we're at with it. Again, most platforms haven't really changed much at all, especially at quarterback. But yeah, we just wanted to kind of interact with that as we transition over to the running back position.
Yeah. So let's hop back over. Okay. So for running backs, as you can see on the board now, the first tier is Christian McCaffrey. He's been him. He is him. As long as he is healthy, he continues to be him. And that's the only worry with him. Otherwise, jump into tier 2. Bijan, Brees, Jameer, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, Kyron, and Travis Etienne. All these guys just feel very safe, and we could see them leading rushing yards. We could see them leading in receptions. All these possibilities with these guys. So yeah, that's why.
With this tier, there's been next to no change with anybody. All of them are the safest, RB ones that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
After this tier, it's kind of more a little higher risk, but everybody's kind of been swapping within each other. I think Jonathan Taylor and Barkley have flipped, and maybe Bijan and Brees have flipped back and forth throughout the summer. But really, this kind of 8 has been the same for us the entire summer, and is probably going to stay that way. I don't really see anybody else jumping into this tier. And unless there's an injury, I don't see anybody jumping out because they are the clear alphas in their respective backfields.
Right. And that doesn't necessarily reflect on other platforms. As you can see, Travis Etienne is behind some players that we have higher, that we have lower, but that's okay. And then in the next tier, good upside, great value. All these guys, they have opportunities to be top 5 running backs, in my opinion. Josh Jacobs, he's got an open backfield. I think he's got opportunities. James Cook could be, they don't have that many weapons. So why can't he be one of the big weapons for them? Isaiah Pacheco, volume. Devon Achane is 40-point upside any day of the week. Alvin Kamara, receiving ability. Joe Mixon, consistency. Rashad White, James Conner-esque player.
Yeah, so with all these guys, they're very safe. For one reason or the other to produce in return for you. All of them essentially are going the second through the 4th round. Really, it's kind of just each one has a case for, I don't know, there's a case or argument you can make that they're not going to hit their ceiling because of this.
Right.
Like Josh Jacobs, on top of being in a committee style offense, which he used to be just in a bell cow offense, he also has target competition. So it's like, is he just going to be like a Derrick Henry, but healthier and younger? James Cook, he has next to no competition from an RB perspective, but they're lining up Curtis Samuel in the backfield. And Josh Allen is going to have 15 rushing touchdown upside. So last year he was killing it, but he had no goal line work essentially. And that was with no competition. So that's his argument for not capturing upside. Isaiah Pacheco, by default, was one of the only options with Kansas City that was reliable. They bolstered their passing game, and I guarantee you they would much rather go their offense through Patrick Mahomes than Isaiah Pacheco. So if Patrick Mahomes rebounds and has a top 3 season again that we're accustomed to seeing, that's going to negatively impact Isaiah Pacheco. I don't see him gaining top 5 or a top 5 RB with Patrick Mahomes also being a top 3 quarterback. I think they don't positively correlate. Devon Achane, obviously injury risk, touch risk, because explosive offense. Raheem Mostert, people still love for some reason. And then they also drafted Jalen Wright, which people still want to draft for some reason. But either way, there's high-powered offense. He's not going to have 20 touch a game upside. He's going to be 12 to 15.
Right.
But it's if he breaks one, and he will break one on occasion. Alvin Kamara, we actually dropped a couple spots, and it's mainly just because he's probably in the worst offense of any of these players.
Mhm.
He has the least amount of competition. However, he is older. He was inefficient last year,
It's
but
all
he
receiving.
still, it was all receiving work.
Yeah.
But he had less than 700 rush yards. So if he keeps that the targets and receiving work up, cool. He deserves to be as a high end RB2, low end RB1. But
Right.
I don't see it just being for sure a top 5 running back again. Joe Mixon, he's just had volume galore. Houston kind of leaned towards the end of the year on Devin Singletary instead of being a committee with him and Dameon Pierce. He's going to walk right into 20 touches. Depends on what he does with it because it is high-powered offense. He should have north of 10 touchdowns. Just don't know, how high he can go
Right.
from
For
here.
sure.
And then Rashad White, again, he has next to no competition, but he's a 0 as a runner. He
Mhm.
just has volume.
Tons of volume. And then the next little group, we start off with Derrick Henry, Kenneth Walker. It's our feel goods on paper. Has path for disappointment. I'm actually, slowly on the Kenneth Walker train, just pushing him up.
It's
I mean,
turning, man.
it's there, man. And then Aaron Jones, new team, new situation. Not sure the quarterback, what's going to happen there, but that's okay. I mean, he's going to be a volume king. David Montgomery, goal line rushes. And then Zamir White, we are lowering because we're not sure of his floor, I guess is the best way to put it. Because I don't
Right.
know if he'll get the 20 touches. I think he could, but there's a way that he does not.
He is probably the biggest at risk of any, of the first 5 tiers of dropping to the next tier.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with what's going on in camp. It's just us rethinking his upside because we talked about him in our hates video for ADP, and it's just like I don't want to invest a late 5th, early 6th with him. Well, if I'm hating that, why is he in the tier 4 that we feel good on paper?
Right.
So that's our thought with that. But all these guys are saved. Derrick Henry probably is talented enough to be in tier 3, but we're just emphasizing our stand on him because we hate him in the second round, and we will not move off that thought.
Yeah.
Tier 5, uncomfortable 2s. The biggest thing to note in this tier, because there was 0 movement, 21 through 25, was Javonte Williams prior to preseason, or I'm sorry, prior to training camp starting. Yeah. Oh, Jaleel McLaughlin is going to steal touches. Oh, Javonte's fighting with Samaje Perine for a roster spot, and he's ran with nothing but the ones.
Yeah,
having
he's
a great
the guy.
camp. Everybody's talking high on him. So we were going to move him down just because it's like, okay, if he is truly fighting for a roster spot, maybe we should put him into the roller coasters that, low risk. His ADP, we were already fine with, even if it was worth the risk to begin with. But now that it's having a positive camp, it's like, well, we were right on him.
Yeah,
so
bet
I'm
on
glad
talent.
I'm glad we stood pat, kind of thing.
Yeah, got to bet on talent, guys.
DeAndre Swift is purely a PPR option. We just are nervous about his goal line and important touch work. He'll be a good PPR back. He has competition because there's 2 really good running backs behind him, and if it does stay all 3 of them, they will all get touches.
Right.
And it'll be frustrating if you invest a 6th round pick and Roschon Johnson is scoring a touchdown in an important, good game with a good matchup. Like, that's in the paths of a conversation. And there's a history of him just being next to a guy and that other guy taking all the important touches.
Yeah. And then the next tier 6, roller coaster running backs. Biggest things to note from this tier is Chase Brown.
Yes.
He has jumped above Zach Moss at this point. He is the one. He's running with the 11 on 11s. He's the number 1 running back in Cincinnati, which is someone that we were taking a lot of, and we're very happy that we did. And then I think that the other person to note is Jonathan Brooks is falling a little bit. That's because of the fact that he has the injury, and we still don't have a true timetable for him. So that's why he's moving down.
Yeah. So with Chase Brown, there's no other player on any position that is not rising faster in best ball drafts than Chase Brown.
Right.
It's because he is running mostly with the ones. It is not Zach Moss, and he's being explosive. He's showing upside. So we're just kind of like, listen, we were already on that to begin with. Let's stop being safe and just take the stand on him, because we love taking stands, whether we're right or wrong. We don't want to be straddling the fence and saying, oh, I'm going to have, some of him, some of him, some of him, some of him.
Right.
Like, we're going all in, or we're just not going to touch some guys, especially if you have to separate a tier of like 8 guys.
Yeah.
So good offense, a lot of touches that are void because Joe Mixon leaving. He should get important touches.
Mhm.
Whether the only thing is, I don't know if he has 10 touchdown upside because Zach Moss could be the goal line back, but 2 minute drill, they're always kind of running out of shotgun for the most part. That's kind of stylistically more inclined for Joe Burrow. That suits Chase Brown much more. He probably could rise even further up in these rankings. Touching on Jonathan Brooks a little bit, we knew the ACL injury was there. The only thing is just he could miss week 1 or 2 or
Yeah.
3, or even if he doesn't, this isn't a first half of the season where I need
Right. For
all
sure.
this production. He's a late season investment. So in redraft leagues, he's going as an RB3 or RB4. Just sit him. I promise. It'll work out eventually.
Right.
It
For
will
sure.
work out eventually. And that's why we have him so high up, is because late in the season, Carolina has some juicy matchups. And it's just like, as ugly as it sounds, investing in Carolina players, you have to take stands on certain people. Again, we can't emphasize that enough. And he's one of those guys that's just like, he could be possible league winner,
Right.
Tony Pollard-esque in 2022 with Zeke, like that style of player, and that's where he's going, very reasonable price, and that's just where we have to touch on him.
Yep. And then the next grouping, tier 7, opportunities for big workloads. I mean, volume is king, guys. Volume is king. And all these guys could get the volume. You look at, Zeke, he's the starting running back for the Cowboys. The guys that I want to touch on are Jerome Ford, because Nick Chubb is climbing, and we actually have Nick Chubb ahead of Jerome Ford. They're next to each other. And then I think that the biggest one on this list truly is Tyjae Spears.
Yes.
Because of just the weird, like the situation. It's just the situation that really intrigues me, I guess.
Yeah, he would be much higher up if it weren't for them investing in Tony Pollard. By default, we're putting him above, but he has the same upside that Tony Pollard does. So if Tony Pollard again starts to struggle, he
Right.
struggled last year in Dallas, despite being a top 15 running back. He sucked if you drafted him in the second round. It wasn't working. We were off him completely. If he just never gets back to it, and it's kind of like Austin Eckler, where we were projecting him to just stay
Right.
declining, then Tyjae Spears is next man up. And it's just like, I think it's more hot potato, ride the hot hand.
Mhm.
So in redraft, it's a little more frustrating to invest in either of those guys. But in best ball, I completely understand the reasoning behind Tyjae. He's risen a little bit, but he's still just right past the ADP of 100. We're just kind of right in the middle on the fence with him. Eckler, we're just completely off of. Like he's split even wider between him and Brian Robinson Jr. It doesn't matter the platform, even if it's PPR. Brian Robinson is a really good running back, and Austin Eckler looked just so bad last year that I think he is basically going to be a slightly better version of what Antonio Gibson was, who was a complete zero
Right.
last year. And then the hardest people to rank really is the Cleveland running backs, Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford. I just don't know what to do with them. Obviously, the more that Nick Chubb rises, the less I want him.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerome Ford is still at a reasonable price, but it doesn't, especially in redraft, I don't even know if I want either guy, just because I think they're just going to be annoying to both.
Right.
To
Yeah.
each guy, and it's just going to cap both persons up, or both people's upside.
I feel like Jerome Ford is the option when you go to best ball for sure. And then in redraft, I don't want to touch either of them. I mean, we're getting to the point though where you stop drafting these guys in redraft anyways. So.
Right. The biggest tidbit before we do move on, Devin Singletary is one that I hope I'm not wrong on, because he was really good to end the season last year, and now he goes into the worst offense that I can project right now, and he is by default the starter. And so we've drafted some Tyrone Tracy Jr., but it doesn't sound like he's having much of an impact so far. And if it's just Devin Singletary's workload, he's going to by default just fall into some of the upper echelon of touches, and he's just going to be a value play and just be solid. And if that's the case, maybe he deserves to be a little higher. I saw an argument of just like, hey, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, they used to be a tandem, and Devin Singletary just never let Zach Moss have touches. So why is he behind Zach Moss in every ranking? And right now we have a whole tier basically to
difference.
I don't disagree with that at all. And so that's kind of one of those guys that I'm keeping an eye on, especially in preseason, because I want to know, are we way too low on him?
Right. Fair enough. And I want to know if we're way too low on his teammate, which of course we might put him in the top 50 by the end of it. But if you look at this top 50, of course, we've talked a ton about Kamani Vidal. Marshawn Lloyd is a guy that we get a lot in best ball. But then after that, it's very uncomfortable. And I actually almost feel like, of course, Marshawn Lloyd and Kamani Vidal are handcuffs, but I see their path to getting fantasy points without a need for an injury. While all these other guys, Blake Corum, injury. Tyler Algier, maybe. They had good reports about him playing. Rico Dowdle, maybe, because he's behind Zeke and Zeke's old. He's probably the pass catching back. Zach Charbonnet, when Kenneth Walker's playing, Kenneth Walker's playing.
Yeah. I saw somebody try to hype up Zach Moss, and it's like Kenneth Walker missed 3 weeks last year, and Zach Moss literally did nothing to be like, oh, yeah,
Zach Charbonnet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Yeah. I hate both of them. I'm just kidding. But yeah, Zach Charbonnet, he didn't do enough. He was very inefficient with his workload, and then Kenneth Walker comes right back in and is just his efficient self.
Right.
So it's just like, what did you see that is going to be any different? Ty Chandler had a couple solid weeks in the year when he took the job over from Alex Madison, but Aaron Jones is much better than Alex Madison.
Right.
So I don't know how much upside he has outside of an injury. That's why this is the handcuff zone. The biggest dropper in this was Kendre Miller. We had him at the top of this tier, and he suffered an injury day one of practice. Can't predict that, unfortunate. But we didn't want to drop him out of the top 50 because if he is indeed healthy, if you're drafting a handcuff and you have to go this deep, you're not anticipating to start the RB 49.
No.
Week 1.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is hey, maybe week 12, Alvin Kamara goes down because he's older and we're relying on him too much. And Kendre Miller's fresh, next man up, and comes in and does well. That's the thought. Antonio Gibson dropped a couple spots because Ramondre, since our first ranking, got extended.
Right.
So that kind of gives us a little more confidence in Ramondre not splitting the workload as much. And Antonio Gibson in a 1B role with Brian Robinson Jr. really did not show up the last couple of years. So we're just like, he's in there, but it's because nobody else has really taken that spot. But he's really on the outside looking in on staying in there. He's kind of trending downward.
Right. And so what we'll do is we'll show you all the differences that we have between this year and last year, or between this ranking and last ranking. As you can see, Kendre Miller, minus 19 spots. That makes sense to me. Because of the injury, minus 10 spots for Austin Eckler. We're kind of out on that guy, as Cam has said. And then Zamir White, minus 7. We got a little bit nervous. He's moved down on our real rankings compared to, he was like RB 18, I think. So that's why he's moving.
Yeah, and again with him, it's mainly just about, does he deserve to be in this tier? Because I kind of feel just comfortable with him being in the 18 to 20 range, right? Because by default, he's RB1, high volumes of touches. But it's just whether or not he deserves to be in the tier of the other guys. And he was much closer to them in our overall ADP rankings. And we've dropped him about half a round to a round because of, we just feel like, I don't know if he belongs with Kenneth Walker right now.
Right.
And then, Zach Moss, again, we're swapping him and Chase Brown. So that's why he's down. Rachaad White. It's just kind of is what it is. We just kind of preferred some more guys. Everybody else, pretty much, like I said, you're not going to see much movement from most people. 1 and 2 spots. Our biggest risers, Chuba Hubbard enters the top 150 for us. It's mainly because of the fact that Jonathan Brooks is out and he was RB 13 the last couple of weeks of the season last year. So if he is starting and Jonathan Brooks is not playing, he has really good value to start the season, especially if you weren't able to hit the running backs you wanted to early in your draft. Tyjae Spears, we've risen in ADP ranking, even though we haven't done a ton of position rank. We do like him. We're just probably a little too low, and we'll just kind of wait and see. Isaiah Pacheco, he didn't really rise in terms of ADP, or he's been in the fringe RB1, RB2 tier. It's just ADP wise, we understand that there's nobody competing for touches with him.
Right.
He's just going to walk into 20 touches per game, and not many running backs outside of the first 2 rounds can say that.
Yep, absolutely. So let's jump over to our next set. I'm sorry, I am getting it together here. And we're going to go to wide receivers. Looking at the first tier of wide receivers, it hasn't changed. Actually, the first 2 tiers have not changed for us at all, which is exciting because that makes it really easy to talk about. You look at what we've got here, CD, Tyreek, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Justin Jefferson in tier 1. All of those guys are dominant at the position. So I really don't have much to say about those guys.
They're target alphas. They're going to, if they're healthy, doesn't matter the situation, they should average over 20 points a game in PPR leagues. And if you are able to get one of them, awesome. But you're not going to get two. And if you
No way.
are, then you're probably in an auction draft, and good for you because those are the best drafts.
That's expensive.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, it is. The next tier we got Puka. Again, him, Garrett Wilson, and AJ Brown are really just right next to each other in every platform.
Yes.
At the end of the first round, can't go wrong with any single one. The only thing is AJ Brown. Again, he made it or ADP hates list is mainly because he has target competition. Garrett Wilson, his only thing is, can Aaron Rodgers stay healthy? Because if he is, he's getting 150 plus targets, 10 plus touchdowns, and nobody's touching him in terms of production from wide receiver position. It's not Malachi Corley, it's not Mike Williams. The only thing is, if they do trade for Devontae Adams, because there's been flirting, there's always going to be flirting because Devontae and Aaron are close, then that we'll have to reassess from there. But if it presently constructed, it's just Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, they're going to be Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
Puka Nacua, we have him just as high. We still like Cooper Kupp based on where he's going ADP. But we just think he's kind of surpassed Cooper. And Cooper's kind of, he's 30, going on 31. And Puka just really took it to him towards the end of the season once Cooper got healthy. I think there will be some frustrating weeks on occasion, but at the end of the day, Sean McVay, high volume offense, high pace, and Puka should be very big beneficiary. And then Marvin Harrison, Devontae Adams, love them. It just kind of depends on where they fall to you. Both of them, if they're at the end of the second round, awesome. If they're early second round, makes me a little more nervous. Devontae Adams, quarterback situation, just complete unknown. And then Marvin Harrison, it's just no rookie's ever gone this high. And so ADP wise, we are on board lockstep, except for ESPN. He's the 10th pick. It's just like when you're drafting teams, you need some value here and there. And the only thing is he's just right where we have him. So is he going to enter the upper echelon of the tier one already this early? That's just kind of the question that remains to be seen.
Right. And then the next grouping, exciting players with a little bit of uncomfortable ADPs. The guys that I want to hit on in this grouping is actually the teammates, Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins. We talked about them on another video recently. And then Brandon Ayuk, because he is now, and you can't tell, but 16 and 17 is Ayuk and Debo.
Yep.
And so that's definitely something we should talk about for sure.
Yeah. So with the Houston teammates, they made our loves list. It's really kind of ADP on redraft versus best ball. Both Diggs and Nico Collins are going in the third round plus in redraft leagues. To me, take your stand, but at least one deserves to be in the second round or earlier. And if that's Nico for you, draft him.
Yeah.
Like he's a perfect hit. We're drafting him a good amount in second round because in best ball drafts, because it's just in an uncomfortable rank and it's really easy to stack him and Stephon Diggs because he's continuing to fall. And then CJ Stroud is kind of the last tier of the tier 2 quarterbacks going in the 6th, 7th round. So it's really easy to get to. That's why we're investing in him. Stephon Diggs, we're taking the stand on. We don't care. We talked about it all summer. If it were wrong, we're wrong. But he was 20 points a game for the first 10 weeks of the season. And you just need 15 to be a wide receiver, high-end wide receiver 2. Sign me up.
Right.
And then Brandon Ayuk, obviously, he's still not practicing. It's training camp. Holdout situation. Will he get traded? Will he not? We probably have the vibes that he'll stay there. But at the end of the day, if he does leave, that actually makes him go down in our eyes. That doesn't make him go forward. We dropped him into the end of the tier just in case we need to move him down. But he is certainly, if he goes to Pittsburgh or Washington or wherever, he is going to drop to our tier 4. And I'm not sure how far he'll go in terms of overall rank. But that's just kind of how we view him. And Debo, he was kind of middle of the tier 4. We moved him up. Again, he's kind of a little George Kittle, but not as much in terms of his ceiling versus floor.
Right.
But again, you'll have he's had some injuries starting to kind of pile on the last couple seasons. And, I think actually if it is Brandon Ayuk and Debo, Brandon Ayuk, I have a slight lean to, but it's not that far off.
Right.
That's why we kind of moved Debo up a little bit. And he correlates with our lines to end the season, which best ball, DraftKings underdog, you want to correlate your week 15 through 17 lines. We're drafting a lot of Lions. That is the dead last game to decide who wins $1 million. And if we go Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's really easy to just say, hey, Debo, come over here.
Yeah. They're in the third round.
So, but yeah, we'll kind of transition into tier 4 as well. Devontae Smith, DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp, DK, Zay, Jalen Waddle, Keenan Allen. Like, take your pick. This tier is so good. It's
Yeah.
so good. I feel comfortable with almost every single one of these guys as a wide receiver too. Really, the only guy that's dropped in our eyes is Michael Pittman, and it's mainly just because where he's going is kind of the start of this tier in the early to mid third round, and then I've got to turn around at the fifth round and Anthony Richardson, who's a low volume passing quarterback, and say, oh yeah, this guy's going to get 10 to 12 targets.
Yeah.
I don't see
He's
it.
12
So
on ESPN. 12.
yeah, that's insanely awful. Like that, if everybody else wasn't more on par with where we were, we would probably have put him on the hates list. But that is absolutely atrocious of a ranking on ESPN. The only thing is, in terms of overall ADP, receivers are much lower on redraft leagues, so he's still in the third round. So it's not
Right.
insanely stupid.
Yeah, the other guys that are on here, the teammates DJ Moore, much higher than his teammate Keenan Allen. I don't think that, it should be such a big disparity. And we actually talked about that in our loves video. We don't hate DJ Moore. We like DJ Moore a lot, but it doesn't make him
2 rounds better.
Yeah, exactly. So if you go watch that video, you'll see some of us talking about that.
If it was a perfect world, I would have them right next to each other. But I'm giving the respect of Vegas and others that have more time for information stuff to have a little bit of a gap. But we moved them closer together because it's just like we can't stop talking about Keenan Allen and the connection that he should have with Caleb Williams. It's really injuries is the only thing that's going to stop him from being a reliable wide receiver for your team.
Right. And then the next grouping is you can't even fit them all on the page, basically. It's 15 players for our wide receiver galore. Basically, it's just so many good football players, and you kind of just take your pick on where you're at. I don't know that Malik Neighbors is going to be better than, Marquise Brown. I don't think, that you can just pencil that in because Malik Neighbors is on a bad offense. Terry McLaurin, Christian Kirk, all these guys, like, you have to think that they could switch positions and it be okay, basically.
Yeah, there hasn't been really a ton of movement in terms of people dropping into it versus coming into it.
Right.
Rashee Rice, we bumped up into this tier by default because, again, no suspension news yet. And if you painted a picture where it's like, I know he's playing 17 games.
I'm not even to him yet. He's right there, guys.
Yeah. sorry.
Because I can't get all
I'm looking at my screen as well. But yeah, Rashee Rice deserves to be in this tier if we know he's going to play. And if we have to operate if he's going to play unless otherwise at this point, because if it's August and there's no suspension news, I can't just be like, oh yeah, he's going to be suspended this year for 6 games because I feel like it'll be a 4 to 6 game suspension. I just don't know when. And at this point, I feel like that lengthy of a suspension, we would have known already.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like somebody like Jordan Addison, who had a DUI arrest precedent for 3 games, there's a precedent for it also being in the middle of the season, but it's only 3 games.
Right.
So, 3 weeks, most players miss a couple games. So it's not like we had to drop him a ton. We actually moved up Christian Watson a couple because Emery's just convincing me that he has the upside, and I'm right there with him at this point. Keon Coleman is the only of this tier rookies because you see Brian Thomas, Ladd, and Romer are omit from this tier. We just think that there's opportunity to really it's just Curtis Samuel and Dalton Kincaid he's competing with. That's it.
Yep.
So we may not love him as much in terms of prospect. He has just the opportunity this year. Chris Godwin, his career years came out of the slot. He's working in the slot every single day. JSN hasn't moved in terms of our ranking, but we are still much higher on him compared to everybody else.
Right.
And then also DeAndre Hopkins, missing 4 to 6 weeks. We dropped him to the bottom of this tier. And again, 4 to 6 weeks is from this point. So again, probably same thing as Jordan Addison.
Week 3.
Same thing as Jordan Addison, missing 2 to 3 weeks. You just know it's going to be at the beginning of the season. If you wanted to put a flyer on him, you're able to put him in your IR spot if your league has an IR spot too. But at this point, especially in best ball, we're going to have to start dialing it back on him because we're north of 10% on him. And so not a crazy stand on him, but he just kept falling to us at wide receiver 4. And now he's going to fall even further. But we shouldn't just be like, okay, we should keep taking him because it's not like we were that in love with him to begin with.
Right. Absolutely. And then sorry, I get closer to this thing. And then the next grouping is the Spike Week grouping. Lots of rookies in here. We can kind of talk about them all together. Brian Thomas, Rome Odunze, and Ladd McConkey. Just opportunity as a rookie later on in the year. That's what you want. Cortland Sutton is the last receiver, number one receiver on his own team, except for New England currently. But we don't even know who the number one receiver there is. And then Curtis Samuel, guy that's getting running back looks, which is pretty cool. And we have a good amount of Josh Palmer. Jameson Williams is going way too early for us. And Jacoby Meyer, I have some of.
Right. So, and again, with Jameson Williams, we haven't gotten a ton of, and it's not because you look at their ADPs and it's like best ball underdog, or DKM underdog 48,
Yeah.
and we have him at 50. That's not crazy. But guess what? He's going 90th now.
ADP
on
wise,
both.
yeah.
And it's
Crazy.
just like, man, that's rough. That is
Tough.
rough. So
Tough.
we love and appreciate those that are, or you're trying to project stands and stuff like that, but you don't want it to turn into something where you're just like completely, you know, if I'm going for a wide receiver 4, which is kind of in the range that he's entering, I want somebody that I know he's going to get the
Right.
volume and
For
stuff.
sure.
I think he's good. I was never high on him as a prospect to begin with, but
Fair.
I can acknowledge that he's literally the afterthought in that offense. So he has next to no like defenses looking into him and be like,
Right.
oh yeah, we have to watch him over the top. It's just going to be like, hey, if Jameson Williams beats us, Jameson Williams beats us. There's going to be a game where he goes 3 for 130 and 2 touchdowns, and he's going to break a slate on redraft or best ball. But guess what? You're probably not starting him in best ball
Mhm.
at all unless Amon-Ra goes down.
Right.
So I just don't see the path. Guys like Curtis Samuel, Ladd, Rome, and Brian Thomas, I see them having weeks throughout the year, and maybe even Josh Palmer as well, where I can be comfortable starting them at the flex.
Right.
Cortland Sutton, he's one of those guys who we're honoring him by default. He's got to be in this tier. But again, I just wonder. I even have him in a dynasty league, and I'm just like, I'm never going to start him.
Right.
So why do I even have him, kind of thing? Because it's not like he's getting better. He's just going to kind of stay the same way for a couple of years. And
Worst
then he'll be out of the league.
quarterback.
Not
like-
great situation.
Yeah. No, I get it.
He's good. It's just like in redraft, I wouldn't touch him because I don't know when you're ever going to start him
Fair enough.
comfortably. And then in best ball, yeah, he'll have the occasional 15, 17 points. But even last year, he never really had the boom games that he used to have.
Yeah.
Back in his Pro Bowl season prior to his injury.
Yep. And then tier 7, just guys that we think are going to get targets. Rashee Rice is a guy that's a boomer bust. He's perfect for DraftKings and underdog best ball. I mean, sorry, who did I say?
Rashee Rice.
Oh gosh, get out of here. Rashid Shaheed. I'm sorry. And then now I'm all messed up. But this grouping, I mean, it's just a bunch of guys that we think are number 2s and number 3s on their teams. Possibly a number 1 in Demario Douglas. That's my only guy that's on there that's a possible number 1. Xavier Legette, rookie. But yeah, it's just a bunch of 2s and 3s. And
these are guys that are streamers. You're not going to start.
Right.
Some will even be on the waiver wires. Like somebody I love Xavier Legette as a player, and I just don't know how soon he'll produce, especially with the quarterback he's got, offense he's in. But the opportunity is there,
right?
And he could eventually start. Just kind of get like Adam Thielen went through a month last year, even in Bryce Young, who had the worst rookie season ever, or at least that we can remember, and he was still just breaking slates,
right,
or winning you every game that you started him. And you were starting old Adam Thielen in the worst offense in the worst team in football. Well, now it's a better team. Xavier Legette's better at this point. Like, I see a late season surgence of him. Like,
right.
That's in the grand scheme of things. Rashid Shaheed, deeper leagues, he's maybe startable. But again, he's more suited for best ball. We put him at the top of the tier because we just are like, man, they extended him. So they have some belief that feels safe. They didn't really draft anybody of note in terms of receivers. And Chris Olave is not a target hog that's just going to have 12, 14, 15 targets a game. And Rashid Shaheed should get some. And he has the boom. I don't know if anybody else does. Maybe Brandon Cooks that has the over-the-top boom on an occasional 4 or 5 week during the season basis.
Yeah, there's no one we're super excited about. I'm actually excited about Demario Douglas because I think that he's my favorite pick out of that team.
Right.
But at the same time, we have no idea. It could be Javon Baker. For all we know.
Basically, every single New England receiver is going outside the top 50. So if you have a vibe on not Javon Baker, but Jalen Polk, I can see
right.
that.
Yeah.
He's doing good in camp and all that stuff. But I'm just not doing that. I think if I had to extend this down to wide receiver 61 through 70, I think Jalen Polk's probably 62 or
Yeah,
63.
for sure.
And then if you have him flip with DeMar Douglas, regardless, both should be there. And they're really the only two receivers that I would invest in any kind of format. And then Hunter Henry, I guess, we'll talk
Flyer.
with him as a late streaming.
We'll get there
tight
in a
end,
second with him. But let's check out the differences, of course, from first one to the second one. Rashee Rice, of course, fits there because of the fact that we have no idea what's going to happen.
He
and
went up
it's
by default.
Yeah. Douglas moves up. I think that's probably a little bit of my push on that, which is fine. I will take it.
That's art. I'm completely on
Oh,
board.
I'm glad because we're here.
No, I've been drafting him a ton in the last couple of weeks.
I know.
And then on top of that, he was falling because he missed like the first day or two of camp, but then the last 2 days, like he's the
guy.
He kept
I'm
going.
telling you, he's the guy.
He kept going off.
Yeah.
The only thing is just like, hey, we're projecting a guy with 0 touchdowns in his career to just kind of be a wide receiver 4. But guess what? As a 14th round pick, like what is the investment on that?
Yeah, exactly. Debo moves up 11 spots. That's because of the Ayuk stuff. Yep. Christian Watson, because I'm loving getting him, so that's why. I guess I don't know. Cam's coming along.
No, I'm closing the gap.
Cam's coming along.
Yeah, I'm moving a little bit.
And then of course, there's some guys in here that get five spots. Christian Kirk, Josh Palmer. Those guys are guys that we've been drafting a lot of. So yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense.
And then if you look at the biggest negatives, we just kind of really dropped Michael Pittman Jr. in ADP. I think about 6-7 spots as well, just because like of that group of interior he's in, I just have the least faith in him. I understand he's talented. He just got extended. But it's mainly just because he's not a yak guy. He's not a volume touchdown guy. And he has a quarterback that's going to be throwing less than 25 times a game.
Right.
And he has 2 guys behind him, Josh Downs and A.D. Mitchell, who as prospects are really talented and are also having good camps. And on top of that, he didn't play last year with Jonathan Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
He did, but the trio of Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, and Michael Pittman Jr. And it's like, I just don't see the path where you're just going to be a high-end wide receiver 2 when you just have the competition and the lack of opportunity that he does.
Yep. And Jordan Addison by default because of the possible suspension. And then the other guys are just guys that moved up and down based on other people moving, I think. So pretty easy little group in. Let's get over to tight ends. Let's knock it out.
Not a ton of movement.
No, yeah, exactly. There's one guy at the end, but not much moving around. But yeah, this first 5 are pretty stable. We did put Trey McBride in front of Mark Andrews, which we did not have prior. But, we see the opportunities. Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, and Mark Andrews, all guys that I want before the end of the 5th round.
Yes.
Like, however you look at it.
Again, especially in best ball, the best strategy that you can do is getting one of even the top 9 guys and then pairing him with one more that's in the top remaining 15.
Right.
And then you have a 2 tight end build, and you can use the other 18 picks on the other 3 spots.
Yep.
That's kind of the build that we want to do. And all those guys provide strong floors. This is probably the best tight end year we will ever, or not will ever, but have ever seen thus far in terms of just the depth of guys that could be a top 3 tight end. Usually when it's, Jason Witten or people that were hitting the tight end 3 or 4, it was by default, and they were like 11, 12 points a game. So they were like, okay, I'll get 10.
We're seeing 15.
You've got like 9 guys
upside
that could get you 15 to 20 on upside. That's awesome. That doesn't even include Jake Ferguson, who had 37 points in their wild card game.
Right.
That would have been the highest overall tight end score last year if that was in the regular season. But yeah, there's not everybody in the top 11 stayed the same in terms of being in there. We maneuvered a couple around. I kind of convinced Emory a little bit to move Brock and George over Evan Ingram. It's more so inefficiency, just had high volume, and most of that came after Christian Kirk went down.
Right.
Christian Kirk's back, and also Brian Thomas is in the fold. So we moved him a little down, but they're still in the same range, and deservingly so.
I think they're all 1, 2, 3 in a row.
Exactly.
On our actual rankings. I mean, that's kind of how, sometimes when you have a hard time, you just put them all boom, boom, because just anything can happen. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how it is. In that second grouping, I mean, there's really not much to talk about other than, of course, Trey McBride actually was in tier 2 before, and we had to start putting him in tier 1. It's just that time. Kyle Pitts, our 6th spot. He makes a lot of sense there, getting a little opportunities. But I think it's pretty easy. I'm ready to talk about TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
So this next tier 5, there's one new name, but it was really a tier 4 before that. And TJ was like the thread of like, hey, listen, he would be a top 5 tight end if he was healthy, but ACL injury. Well, sounds like he's ahead of schedule. I don't know if he'll play. And again, kind of similar to what I talked about with Justin Herbert about I'd kind of rather you sit than
right.
than play and possibly linger or whatever. If TJ Hawkinson is starting week 1, and you're telling me I get him as a tight end too.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he's one of those guys that if you grabbed a Kyle Pitts or George Kittle, Brock Bowers, and you're just like, just give me five good weeks, TJ.
Right.
When he's capable of just being tight end 1 when he's healthy.
He had 14.6 fantasy points per game, which was number 1, tied with Kelsey when he played.
And
like, he's
and
that
at
guy.
the top of my head, there's not a ton of examples coming to mind of elite fantasy tight ends that went down with ACL injuries and their recovery rate, because usually with running backs and receivers, we wait a year. Well, with tight end, you were getting 6-7 targets anyways.
Right.
So it's just like, how efficient are you going to be? And so with him, you know, he's kind of right where we have him in our rankings. And depending on how you invested, like that's going to be the fine. I also don't know how much he'll rise in ADP right now based on like it's all the information's there. And if the optimism is he'll be ready by week 1,
he'll be way up there.
Yeah.
He's going to be top 5, 6, 7.
We haven't gotten a ton of him, but we've gotten enough to where it's just like I'm
10, 12%, I think is probably where I'm at.
Yeah, and then these other guys are really tough. Talking about Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, Pat Freiermuth, and Cole Kmet. 3 of them, omitting Pat Freiermuth from this point, just an insane competition for targets and touches.
Yeah.
Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, and Cole Kmet are basically the 4th or 5th options in their respective offenses. But they are talented.
Yes.
But it's basically touchdown dependent, but serviceable. Exactly what I would count as the tier 3. Pat Freiermuth, I actually moved into this ranking, and it's mainly just because he was one of the tight ends that kind of was banged up last year, and he was one of the few ones that actually didn't return value on ADP, because I believe he was right around 10, 11.
Yeah, I had a bunch of him, unfortunately.
Had a bunch of him, and he just got hurt and then came back, and he was just in an ungodly, awful passing offense. Guess who had the number 1 target share percentage of any coach last year?
Oh, it's got to be. I mean, shoot, Johnny Smith. Come on now.
It was Arthur Smith.
Got to be.
And you wouldn't think that, because Kyle Pitts did not return ADP value, because he was like tight end 5 and he was like finishes tight end 9. Well, Johnny Smith was just like an undrafted player that finishes like tight end 13.
Yeah, because of ridiculousness.
Really, Pat Freiermuth, the last time that he was healthy was tight end 7.
Yes.
So right now he's kind of right there with Cole Kmet. And I just think, again, touchdown dependent. I'm not projecting 9 targets from him, but he also has, every once in a blue moon, the 10 catches for 90 yards.
Right.
Like he had one of those games last year out of nowhere. And then the next game was like 2 targets.
Yep.
So again, I think he's kind of vaulted into this next tier mainly because he really doesn't have nearly as much competition. We don't love George Pickens, but by default,
yeah,
he's in one of the higher tiers because of just nobody's near him. And then kind of the same thing with Pittsburgh. It's just like you've got Darnell Washington, who's really solid blocking tight end. I don't know how much he
could be I feel like he could do well in the red zone more than anything.
Yeah,
but
I think he could do like a Gerald Everett role,
yeah,
like to Tyler Higbee kind of thing, where you get 4 to 6 touchdowns, but like on 25 catches.
Yeah, I can see that.
But again, receiver wise, not much competition. And so if you have a guy that you're in an offense where, you know, Pittsburgh is with Arthur Smith, this new regime, and he was the number 1 producer of tight end volume last year, just put him in there. And we don't have a ton of him.
No.
But he deserves to be in this tier after thinking about it. just because it's like if he's having a good camp, he's healthy.
Why
Why
not?
Why not?
Yeah. And then the next grouping, I actually like some of these guys, but it's just really hard to see them panning out, I guess is the best way for me to put it. But I like Luke Musgrave. Got probably the 5th, 6th option on their offense. Cade Otton, he could be the 4th, maybe 5th option. So it's like there's just not these like great avenues for them to navigate to get really good. Taysom Hill, if he's playing quarterback, then I guess you should be happy getting him as the 19th tight end, I guess. But it's just still not comfortable.
I mean,
Nothing is comfortable.
He's undraftable, obviously on Underdog and Yahoo because I'm not touching him as a quarterback. But if you can have 5 rushes and 3 receptions and then an occasional goal line carry for a touchdown, like that's exactly what a tight end 3 is going to do for you. And we've seen him win weeks because of having these weird things, and then also passing for touchdowns.
Right.
So he's there, and then also Juwan Johnson was hurt earlier in this offseason. It's not a long-term injury, but that also helped his ADP vault up a little bit.
Yeah.
The other guys, they're kind of perfect for if you missed out on the first 16 tight ends and you have to go 3 tight end build, double tapping a couple of these guys or one of these guys in one of the next tier is kind of what you have to do. And Luke Musgrave, had a really solid postseason. Only thing is Tucker Kraft, if and when he comes back and is healthy, his competition from a receiver perspective at his own position, which is tough. Cade Otton, for whatever reason, just I feel like he's underutilized as a player.
I agree.
I really do.
I think
like
he's good at football.
I think he's a really good football player. He's kind of like, and it's funny because it's the same team, but Cameron Brate, who I always liked as a tight end, and just kind of always was like, why is he only getting 2 targets? Like, he deserves more. Well, Cade Otton, it's going to be a passing volume offense. He'll have an occasional touchdown.
Right. Hopefully he
also has had upside of 8 and 11 targets.
Yeah.
So interesting. Ben Sinnott, he's the tight end that we liked. It might be a little too high in the rankings, but he's going so low.
It just might be. It might be early on him because I think he's really good, but they just brought in Zach Ertz.
Yeah.
And so it makes me more uncomfortable.
And it's also 34, 35.
Right. But it just makes me more uncomfortable to be like, okay, I liked Ben Sinnott, but now I'm like, now there's competition with a guy that's a veteran versus a rookie. Like, who's going to get the playing time? It's just a little weird. But the next group, Tyler Conklin, Rodgers doesn't really target tight ends.
Never has.
Chig Okonkwo was the big thing last year, and I was like, I'm not doing this. Y'all are tripping.
I was like, y'all can miss me with the 10th round Chig.
Yeah, but I do love Isaiah Likely. Hunter Henry, like we said, we're going to talk about, and then Noah Fant has snuck into our top 25.
So I think the most interesting name, obviously, in this group is Isaiah Likely.
Yes.
He is so talented, and he would be a starting tight end on more than half of the teams in the NFL. The thing is, how often are they going to run 2 tight end sets? How often is he going to line up in the backfield or in the slot, or vice versa with him and Mark Andrews?
Right.
Like, I think there's more opportunity for both of them to be on the field now that Derrick Henry's in the fold because they lost 2 offensive linemen. So they got worse on the offensive line.
Put your tight ends in.
I expect that if you do 2 tight end builds, Tennessee always was among the top of the NFL in 2 tight end sets and stuff like that, or even 3. Like, that just opens up more opportunities for him. And his cap was always just, man, I'm not on the field and I only get 3 targets. But when he came in for Mark Andrews, he missed the last half of the season. He was a top 7 tight end.
He's good at football, man.
He was really good. And even if he wasn't good at football, like Gerald Everett, I don't think has ever been good, but receiving wise and fantasy wise, he's produced.
Right.
He's such a good tight end in terms of fantasy that if he had volume and stuff like that, it's really interesting to see what they'll do with him. But he's going in tight end 3 range in the 180s. If you draft Mark Andrews, please, I want to every single share of Mark Andrews get Isaiah Likely with him. And even if I don't, and I have to do a 3rd tight end because my tight end 2 is, Luke Musgrave, and I'm just like, I want a little bit more of a floor. Well, Isaiah Likely has the opportunity to have 15 to 18 points in a given week. I just don't know which weeks those are if Mark Andrews is healthy. And he's probably going to be by far my most drafted player in this tier.
Yeah, you're going through the negatives, and the only thing I think of, are they actually going to throw the ball more than 20 times a game too, is my other thought. It's like he gets on the field, but if he plays 40% of the snaps and they only throw 8 times while he's on the field, like that's tough. That is tough for a guy. But yeah, so let's go over to, oh, I need to use this mouse. Let's go over to our differences on here. And as you can see,
it's like 90% the same.
Yeah, it's all the same basically.
We rose George Kittle a little bit just because of respect for him.
Pat.
And then also Pat Freiermuth, who was unranked outside of our top 150. He was the biggest mover, by default because we didn't have him in our original top 150, and he deserves to be there. After kind of further review, Brock Bowers and Kittle, like I said, upside is there, and we're just like, you got to give the respect where it's due.
Yeah. Only 4 players moved, out of everybody. And then on the negative side of things, let me flip it. You can see that
it's really
the same. Basically,
the only person that moved negatively is Evan Ingram, and that's only 2 spots in tight end rank. But it was almost a full round because I think we had him at the early part of the 7th, and now it's like late 7th.
We had 6th at 3rd.
So 6th round. Sorry.
Yes.
So it's just like probably more comfortable with him as like a fringe 6-7 turn than a 5-6 turn. And that's why he dropped that much. And on top of that, he went behind those 2 tight ends that we mentioned previously. And then Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, David Njoku, Goddard. Nothing's wrong with them. They just probably were drop below somebody that we liked or needed to rise further up. So,
of course.
Yeah, nothing special there. But yeah, that's our GTD 2.0 rankings.
Yeah. We really appreciate y'all hanging out with us. We'll get this out so y'all can see it. We're going to do this again, of course, right before the season starts, or right before the main time for fantasy drafting, because I think that that's important. Cam brought that up. We really need to make sure that y'all get the most updated thing mid to late preseason, when we really have snap counts and all these different guys.
And there's more injury news.
Yeah.
Really, unless you accidentally fail in practice, there's nothing. But if you actually get hit by somebody, that's a different story and whatnot. So we appreciate you guys. Can't thank you enough. Hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you enjoyed this format, because obviously we did this a little differently than when we did 4 different videos for each position. Tried to go through each position as quickly as we could. We still took an hour. But we appreciate you guys. Let us know if you want us to do it this way, or if you prefer, each video as a breakdown. We appreciate that kind of input. But check out our other videos. We have our love hates list that we put out. So go check those out. We have other videos that will be going in the future, live streaming every Wednesday throughout the rest of August. It's peak fantasy season. Lot to do, lot to talk about, and it's so much fun to do. And we can't thank you enough for tuning in, and we love covering it for you. We can't state that enough.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. We're excited for our first true NFL season with you guys hanging out, and just hopefully we can build this community as the season goes, and maybe we win some money in best ball, and maybe we'll win some money in daily.
Just win money, man.
Yeah, why don't you win some money with your home league? Make sure you beat your dad. That's the plan here.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you all next time.